The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Prince William sat in his private study, reviewing documents that had arrived with the Morning Post. Among the usual correspondence and official papers, one particular envelope caught his attention. It bore no royal seal, no official markings, just his name written in careful handwriting. Inside was a collection of photographs and documents that would change everything he thought he knew about his cousin Zara Tindall's husband,
Mike Tindall.
The images showed Mike in what appeared to be secretive meetings with various businessmen in expensive restaurants and private clubs. But it wasn't just the meetings that troubled William. It was the briefcase that seemed to change hands in several of the photographs. William studied each image carefully, his trained eye picking up details that might escape others. His years of military service had taught him to be observant, to notice when something wasn't quite right. The timestamps on the photographs showed these meetings had been happening for months, always in different locations, always with different people. The documents that accompanied the photographs were even more disturbing. Bank statements, transfer records, and what appeared to be coded communications between Mike and several offshore companies. William's heart sank as he realized the implications. If these documents were genuine, Mike Tindall was involved in something far more serious than anyone in the family suspected. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Catherine, calling from their country home where she was spending time with the children. Her voice was warm and familiar, a stark contrast to the cold reality of what William was discovering. "How are things at the palace?" she asked, sensing something in his voice even through the phone. William hesitated. How could he explain what he was looking at? How could he tell her that someone they trusted, someone who was part of their family, might be involved in illegal activities? "Everything's fine," he said finally, though his voice lacked conviction. After ending the call, William returned to the documents. He spread them across his desk like pieces of a puzzle, trying to understand the full picture. The more he studied them, the more convinced he became that Mike was running some kind of cash scheme, possibly involving money laundering or tax evasion. The evidence suggested that Mike was using his position as a member of the royal family to gain access to wealthy individuals and business leaders. He would meet with them privately, often during or after public events where his presence wouldn't raise suspicion. Money would be transferred through a network of shell companies and offshore accounts, making it nearly impossible to trace. William felt sick to his stomach. Zara had always been one of his favorite cousins. She was down-to-earth, hard-working, and had built her own successful career in equestrian sports. The thought that her husband might be exploiting their family connections for personal gain was devastating. He picked up one of the bank statements and studied it more closely. The amounts were staggering, hundreds of thousands of pounds moving through accounts in various countries. Some of the transactions coincided with major royal events where Mike would have had access to high-profile guests and potential clients. The anonymous sender had included a note with the documents. "This has been going on for 2 years. The family deserves to know the truth." William wondered who could have sent this information and why they had chosen to remain anonymous. Was it someone within Mike's network who had grown uncomfortable with what they were doing? Or was it someone with a grudge against the Tindall family? William knew he needed to verify the authenticity of these documents before taking any action. He couldn't accuse Mike based on anonymous tips alone, no matter how convincing the evidence appeared to be. He made a mental note to contact his private security team and have them conduct a discreet investigation. As the day wore on, William found it impossible to concentrate on anything else. Every meeting, every phone call, every official duty felt meaningless compared to the weight of what he had discovered. He kept thinking about Zara, about their children, about how this would affect the entire family if it became public. The thought of confronting Mike directly crossed his mind. But William knew that would be premature. If Mike was indeed guilty of what the documents suggested, a direct confrontation might give him time to cover his tracks or disappear entirely. William needed more information, more proof. Before he could take action, that evening, William attended a charity gala where both Mike and Zara were present. Watching Mike work the room, shaking hands with wealthy donors and business leaders, William felt a mixture of anger and disgust. Was this how Mike operated? Was he using these very events to recruit new clients for his illegal activities? Mike approached William with his usual friendly demeanor, completely unaware that his brother-in-law was studying his every move. "Great turnout tonight," Mike said casually. "Some really influential people here." William nodded politely, but internally, he was analyzing every word, every gesture. Was Mike already identifying potential targets for his scheme? The thought made William's blood run cold. Later that night, alone in his study once again, William made a decision. He would have the documents analyzed by experts who could determine their authenticity. He would have Mike investigated discreetly, without alerting anyone in the family, until he had concrete proof. And if the evidence proved to be real, he would have no choice but to take action. Regardless of the personal cost to his relationship with Zara, the weight of responsibility pressed down on William's shoulders. As a future king, he had a duty to protect the reputation and integrity of the royal family. But as a cousin and friend, he also had a duty to be fair and just. The balance between these two responsibilities would be tested in the coming days, and William wasn't sure he was ready for what lay ahead. He locked the documents in his private safe and tried to put them out of his mind for the night. But as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much larger and more complicated than he had initially imagined. The grandfather clock in William's study chimed twice as Mike Tindall knocked on the door. William had spent the morning preparing for this confrontation, arranging the evidence methodically on his desk and rehearsing what he would say. Despite his preparation, his hands trembled slightly as he called for Mike to enter. Mike walked in with his characteristic, confident stride, wearing a casual smile that made William's stomach turn. How could someone maintain such a facade when they knew what they had done? Mike settled into the chair across from William's desk, completely unaware that his world was about to come crashing down. "You sounded urgent yesterday," Mike said, crossing his legs casually. "Everything okay with the family?" William took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "Actually, Mike, this is about you." He reached for the first folder on his desk and opened it, revealing several of the photographs that had been sent to him anonymously. "I think you know exactly why I asked you here." Mike's expression changed instantly. The confident smile disappeared, replaced by a look of confusion that quickly transformed into something closer to fear. He leaned forward, studying the photographs, and William watched as the color drained from his face. "Where did you get these?" Mike asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's not what matters," William replied, his voice steady, despite the anger building inside him. "What matters is that I know about your little cash scheme. I know about the money laundering, the offshore accounts, the way you've been using your position in this family to recruit clients for your criminal enterprise." Mike sat back in his chair, running his hands through his hair. For a moment, William thought he might confess, might show some remorse for what he had done. Instead, Mike's expression hardened, and he leaned forward aggressively. "You don't know anything," Mike said, his voice taking on a defensive edge. "These photos could be from any business meetings. There's nothing illegal about meeting with people." William felt his anger surge. Even when confronted with evidence, Mike was still trying to lie his way out of the situation. William opened another folder, this one containing the bank statements and transaction records. "What about these then?" William demanded, spreading the documents across the desk. £5 million laundered through offshore accounts? Money transfers that coincide exactly with your private meetings? Shell companies that exist only on paper? Mike stared at the documents, his jaw working silently as he tried to process what he was seeing. William could see the wheels turning in his head, trying to figure out how much William knew and whether there was any way to talk his way out of this. "This is all circumstantial," Mike said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. "You can't prove anything." William slammed his hand down on the desk, causing Mike to jump. "Stop lying to me," he shouted, his composure finally cracking. "I have transaction records, witness statements, surveillance footage. I know everything, Mike. The only question now is whether you're going to take responsibility for what you've done or force me to drag you through the courts." Mike's facade finally crumbled completely. His shoulders sagged, and he buried his face in his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were red with unshed tears, but William felt no sympathy for him. The time for sympathy had passed the moment Mike decided to betray their family's trust. "You don't understand," Mike said desperately. "It started small, just helping a few friends with some financial problems. The money was just sitting there in these accounts, not hurting anyone. I never meant for it to become this big." "You never meant for it to become big?" William's voice was incredulous. "You've been running this operation for 3 years. You've used every royal event, every family gathering as an opportunity to find new clients. You've turned our family's reputation into a commodity for your criminal enterprise." Mike tried to interrupt, but William wasn't finished. Years of frustration and anger poured out of him as he continued his tirade. "Do you have any idea what this could do to us? To Zara? To your children?" William stood up, pacing behind his desk. "If this becomes public, it won't just destroy you. It will destroy everyone around you. Your children will grow up knowing their father is a criminal. Zara will be humiliated, her reputation ruined." "Zara doesn't know anything about this," Mike said quickly. "She's completely innocent. I made sure to keep her out of it. That doesn't matter." William exploded. "When this comes out, and it will come out, do you think anyone will believe she wasn't involved? Do you think the press will care about the distinction? They'll crucify her along with you." Mike seemed to finally grasp the full implications of what he had done. He slumped in his chair, looking older and more defeated than William had ever seen him. "What do you want from me?" Mike asked quietly. "I want you to confess," William said firmly. "I want you to turn yourself in to the authorities. Return every penny you've stolen and cooperate fully with their investigation. And I want you to tell Zara yourself before she hears it from someone else." Mike looked up sharply. "You can't be serious. If I confess, I'll go to prison for years. My life will be over." "Your life was over the moment you decided to become a criminal," William replied coldly. "The only question now is whether you face the consequences with some dignity or whether you force me to ensure you face them anyway. And if I refuse?" Mike asked, though they both knew he had no real choice. William walked around his desk and stood directly in front of Mike. "If you refuse, I will personally ensure that every piece of evidence I have is turned over to the police and the press simultaneously. You'll be arrested publicly in the most humiliating way possible. Zara will find out from news reports rather than from you. And I will make sure that everyone knows exactly how you betrayed this family's trust." Mike stared at William for a long moment, seeing something in his expression that made him realize there would be no negotiating, no finding a middle ground. William had made his decision, and there would be no changing his mind. "How long do I have?" Mike asked finally. 24 hours, William replied without hesitation. "You have until tomorrow evening to confess to Zara and contact the authorities. If you haven't done both by then, I will." Mike stood up slowly, looking like a man heading to his execution. "I never wanted it to come to this," he said weakly. "Then you should have thought about that before you decided to become a criminal," William replied, his voice devoid of sympathy. After Mike left, William collapsed into his chair, emotionally drained from the confrontation. He had done what needed to be done, but that didn't make it any easier. In 24 hours, his cousin's life would be destroyed. There was nothing he could do to prevent that. The next evening, William received 2 phone calls. The first was from Zara, sobbing so hard she could barely speak, telling him that Mike had confessed everything and was turning himself in to the police. The second was from his private secretary, informing him that Mike Tindall had been arrested that afternoon and charged with multiple counts of money laundering and fraud. William felt no satisfaction in being proven right. He had protected the royal family's integrity and ensured that justice was served. But the personal cost had been devastating. As he sat alone in his study that night, he couldn't help but wonder if there had been another way, a path that could have avoided this destruction. But deep down he knew he had made the only choice he could make, and he would have to live with the consequences just like everyone else. 3 weeks had passed since William first discovered the incriminating documents, and the investigation he had quietly initiated was beginning to yield disturbing results. His private security team, led by a former MI5 operative named James Morrison, had been working around the clock to verify the authenticity of the evidence and uncover the full extent of Mike Tindall's alleged activities, William sat in a secure conference room at Clarence's house, listening as Morrison presented his findings. The atmosphere was tense, and William could feel his anxiety mounting with each piece of evidence that was laid out before him. "Your Royal Highness," Morrison began, his voice grave, "I'm afraid the documents you received appear to be genuine. We've traced several of the bank accounts mentioned. The transaction patterns match what was outlined in the anonymous package." Morrison spread out a series of charts and photographs on the table. "Mike Tindall has been operating what we believe is a sophisticated money laundering operation. He uses his access to high-profile events and wealthy individuals to recruit clients who need to move large sums of money without detection." William studied the evidence with growing horror. The operation was far more extensive than he had initially imagined. Mike wasn't just taking advantage of a few business opportunities, he was running a full-scale criminal enterprise. "How long has this been going on?" William asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Based on our investigation, at least 3 years," Morrison replied. "Possibly longer. The earliest transactions we can definitively link to this scheme date back to shortly after Mike married into the royal family." The implication was clear and devastating. Mike had been using his marriage to Zara as cover for his illegal activities from almost the very beginning of their relationship. William felt a surge of anger, not just at Mike's betrayal of the family's trust, but at the way he had manipulated Zara and used her royal connections. Morrison continued his briefing, explaining how the scheme worked in detail. Mike would identify potential clients at royal events or through his sports connections. He would then arrange private meetings where he would offer to help them move money through offshore accounts for a substantial fee. The money would be transferred through a complex network of shell companies, making it nearly impossible for authorities to trace. "The amounts involved are significant," Morrison noted. "We estimate that Mike has laundered over £5 million in the past 2 years alone. His personal cut would be approximately £1 million. William leaned back in his chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was hearing. This wasn't just about money. It was about the fundamental trust and integrity of the royal family. If this became public, the scandal would be enormous and could damage the monarchy's reputation for years to come. "What about Zara?" William asked, dreading the answer. "Is there any indication that she's involved or aware of what's happening?" Morrison shook his head. "There's no evidence to suggest that Mrs. Tindall is involved in any way. All indications are that Mike has been operating independently, likely without her knowledge. Her financial records are clean, and there's no unusual activity in any of her personal accounts." William felt a small measure of relief. At least Zara appeared to be innocent in all of this. But that also meant she would be devastated when she learned the truth about her husband. William couldn't imagine having to tell his cousin that the man she loved and trusted was a criminal. The meeting continued for another hour as Morrison outlined the legal implications and potential outcomes. If the evidence was presented to law enforcement, Mike would almost certainly face charges for money laundering, tax evasion, and fraud. The sentences for such crimes could range from several years to potentially decades in prison. "You also need to consider the international implications," Morrison added. "Some of the transactions involve clients from countries with which the UK has sensitive diplomatic relationships. If this becomes public, it could complicate those relationships and potentially impact ongoing negotiations." William felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He had the power to expose Mike's crimes and see that justice was done. But doing so would also bring tremendous scandal and embarrassment to the royal family. It would destroy Zara's marriage and potentially ruin her life. Her children would grow up knowing their father was a criminal. "I need time to think about this," William said finally. "This affects more than just Mike. I need to consider the impact on Zara, on their children, on the entire family." Morrison nodded understandingly. "Of course, Your Royal Highness. But I should mention that we're not the only ones investigating this matter. There are indications that at least one other party is aware of Mike's activities and may be planning to expose them publicly." William's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "We've detected some unusual surveillance activity around Mike's movements. Someone else is watching him, photographing his meetings, documenting his activities. If they go public with what they know, it could force our hand." The thought of this information being leaked to the press was William's worst nightmare. At least if he took action now, he could control how the information was released. and potentially minimize the damage to the family. If someone else leaked it first, there would be no controlling the narrative. That evening, William found himself pacing his study, unable to concentrate on anything else. He had tried to carry on with his normal duties throughout the day, attending meetings and fulfilling his royal obligations, but his mind kept returning to the impossible choice he faced. He thought about calling his father, seeking advice from someone with more experience in handling royal crises. But he also knew that once he involved other family members, the situation would be out of his control. Decisions would be made based on protecting the institution rather than protecting individuals. And William wasn't sure he was ready for that. Instead, he found himself thinking about Zara. They had grown up together, played together as children, supported each other through the unique challenges of royal life. She had always been one of the most genuine and down-earth members of their family. Someone who had earned her success through hard work rather than relying on her royal status. The thought of having to destroy her world was almost unbearable. But William also knew that allowing Mike to continue his criminal activities wasn't an option either. Eventually, the truth would come out, and the longer it took, the worse the consequences would be for everyone involved. As midnight approached, William made a decision. He would confront Mike directly, giving him one chance to confess and make things right before taking official action. It was risky. Mike might flee or try to destroy evidence, but William felt he owed it to Zara to at least try to resolve this within the family first. He picked up his phone and sent a carefully worded text message to Mike. "Need to speak with you privately. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., my study at Kensington Palace. It's urgent." Mike's response came back quickly. "Of course. Is everything all right?" William stared at the message, amazed at Mike's ability to maintain his innocent facade, even now. Tomorrow would determine whether Mike was willing to take responsibility for his actions, or whether William would be forced to pursue more drastic measures. Either way, there would be no turning back after tomorrow's conversation.